First of all, I would also like to thank you, everyone here, all the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to be here, and to you all as well, because you are also making this already extraordinary event even more lively. So let's see. If you now kind of see me grasping this bottle and opening it, you probably can really understand that I'm thirsty. Maybe the timing is a bit wrong because I'm just at the beginning of my talk, but I think it's easy for you to understand my intention just by looking at my actions. Similarly, if I now show you pictures such as, and I ask you to write 2 lines about what you see, I think that very few of you would just spend more than few lines in describing that the background is white, or that the child is wearing a kind of warm coat. What you will describe is that you see a child that is suffering, that is in despair. And I would even be tempted to say that you would not just be able to describe it. Before that, you just feel it. You just share the despair of this child. And what I'm interested, and what the people also that work with me are interested in, is trying to understand the brain mechanism that basically allow us to perceive and share the actions, sensations, and emotions of other individuals without the need all the time to spend hours in thinking about it. And now I'm also sure that the fact that you are able to share this distress is also influencing whether you're going to tell me yes or no to my question whether you're willing to host this child for a couple of days. So, is this ability to share the emotions of others influencing the way we interact with the others, whether they make us pro-social? And finally, you've heard already a lot about cross-species. So is this ability to share the emotions of others unique to humans? Or do we have evidence, as some has been already shown, that animals can also do that? And finally, is this ability something static? Or is something we can work with, that we can use, that we can regulate? So I want now to give you an insight on how we study these topics. So we would call you in the lab, and then I can try to image your brain activity while, for instance, you perform an action. And then here in red, you see that the motor system that we all expect to be activated, is there when you perform the action. Now, what I can do is to show you another movie, not another movie, like one movie of somebody performing a similar action. And I can map, again, your brain response to seeing this someone. And that's what you see here in blue. And what you want you to notice is that these blue blobs, actually fall within the red circuits, the one that makes me act. And this suggests that in many cases, maybe in order to understand the other individuals, what we do is we reactivate and we use the brain mechanism that make ourselves move. That's an easy shortcut, because I don't know anything about you, right? So I'm just using myself to interpret what you do. And now, what I could do next is just ask every of you to tell me how heavy you think that this object is, right? I can collect all your responses and plot it. Oh, this is not good. And plot it here on a graph. And I can conclude, that you're in average 60% accurate. But now, if all these circuits that you see in white helps me to understand and perceive the actions of other people, if I now go and perturb the activity in that circuits with methods that really allow to temporarily perturb the activity in a reversible way, I can again ask you to tell me the weight of the object while I'm perturbing this region and plotting your performance again. And we see that when I perturb the regions that I believe they help you to perceive the actions of others, then you indeed become worse in understanding what the action means or what the action carries. Then once we have learned that, we can run a couple of experiments on a similar kind of structure in which, for instance, I place you in the scanner, I start touching your legs to map how you sense and what you feel. And then I can also show you videos of somebody else being touched, and I can again look for an overlap, the white blobs. And what about emotions? because that's also what we mostly associate with empathy. I can do the same. I can ask you to come in. I can give you a nice anesthesia mask in which I can puff some very disgusting odorants. And I can map the activity of the brain that reacts to these bad odorants or bad taste. And again, I can show you a movie of somebody else drinking from a cup. Would you drink from it, by the way? No, I hope so. And when you see somebody drinking from this cup, you again activate the very same region, which is the anterior insula, in this case in blue. And again, this region overlaps with the region that makes me feel disgusted. And if you have a stroke, or you have a tumor, for instance, that makes the insula not work properly, then I will lose my ability to actually perceive disgust, to be disgusted. So if somebody would offer me a nice molded nata, I would just happily eat it as nothing happened. And at the same time, if the insula doesn't work properly, it will also impair my ability to recognize disgust in others. And this is also true for pain. If I feel pain, if I receive pain, or if I observe somebody being in pain, again, we have an overlap in our brain between the regions that make me normally feel in pain and in response, that basically these regions become reactivated in response to the pain of others. And the activity within these regions also correlates with the intensity of the pain, okay, as Marta also pointed out. And and again, if I now ask you to tell me how much pain you see in this kind of stimuli, right, and I plot it against how I think this, or how much pain I gave to the person in the videos, I see that they have a very nice correlation. And if I perturb the regions that I know that are involved in perceiving the pain, I see again that this correlation is perturbed. So here we have accumulated more and more this evidence that this overlap is important for you to correctly perceive what goes on in others. But not only about perception and sharing, these regions may also influence your decisions. So if I now give you some money, okay, and I give you the options to give up some of the money in order to reduce the pain of another person, and if now I go and perturb, again, these regions that are involved in sharing the pain of others, what I will see, is again that your ability, that your decision become a bit more random, simply because you stop perceiving and attributing what you see, the pain that you perceive, to what it feels like, right? To how much money you want to donate. So what I think is that as the pain that I feel when I hurt myself serves as a motivator for going to remove the cause of this pain, we also believe that reactivating brain regions that are involved in my own feeling of pain when I observe somebody else in pain can serve, in a way, as a motivator to help other people. Okay, I see pain, it makes me feel in pain, and now I act upon it. So what I've shown you so far is basically that when we are together, I can perceive your actions of sensation and emotion, and this means that I reactivate brain regions that are there for making me act, sense, and feel. And if I now play around with this activity, I don't perceive anymore as well as before. I don't share the emotions as well as before. And also that being there, these activations can also influence my behavior and the way I decide to act upon it. So the next question now becomes, as I anticipated before, is this something unique to humans? Well, the answer I can anticipate you is no. And with the way we now are going to look at is very similar to what also Marta does. We work with rodents, both mice and rats. And now we can place two animals together to habituate to the environment and to habituate to each other. And then a few days later, what I can do, I can give a small shock to the demonstrator. So the demonstrator will be freezing because he's scared. He cannot escape. There is no way he can escape from that place. So here what I can plot now is the amount of freezing over time during the baseline period, where I expect nobody to freeze, or during the delivery of the shocks. And what you see here in red or orange, brown, you see the response of the demonstrator. So the demonstrator received the shock, and indeed it starts freezing in response to it. But look what happens in blue to the observer. He was just witnessing the demonstrator. Nothing happens to the observer. There is no way that he could have gotten the shock himself. And nevertheless, after a while, it also starts freezing. Okay. So somehow the state of this animal has been transferred to the observer. And most importantly, if I now, before the test, I take the observer and I make it experience what it means to receive a shock. So in a separate phase, in a pre-exposure phase, I give a small shock to the observer. And then I place him back together with the demonstrator. And on the day of the test, I give the shock to the demonstrator. What do we expect? This is what we expect, right? The two curves almost are identical, suggesting that our own experiences with what we are going to observe, will amplify our reactions at the moment in which we will observe them. Okay, and more similar are the experiences that I have in the past to those that I'm going to witness. Higher my attention and my response to them will be. And most importantly, the demonstrator is basically transferring its emotional state to the observer. But we now have also a lot of evidence that the observer itself will transfer emotion back to the demonstrator. So if the observer will be a calmer animal, then the demonstrator will also freeze less. So there is always an interaction between the two individuals. The information is not one way. It's always bidirectional. And I think that as humans, we are very well aware of that feeling. So why do we evolve this ability to share? Okay, the answer is kind of quite simple, I think. As Marta also pointed out, it's very important that we understand whether the environment we're in is a safe environment or not. Okay, so if now I'm a rat here and a cat appears, I will be scared, so we start freezing. But what about this rat? This rat does not have access to the cat. He will not see that the cat is there. But this rat has access to the other rat, right? So this will perceive the distress of the animal and then start freezing again. And now the cat goes away. The animal with the information, we say, okay, now it's time. I can go. There is no danger anymore. Okay? And now the second animal basically can also learn from the previous one that there is no dangers anymore. And then everything is fine. And at the end, if you think of us, we also developed tools to amplify this situation, right? We've heard before also the example of the car. We have red lights in the car because sometimes, we want to, the driver in front of us has access to information that we don't. And now we amplify them also by having the red light behind the car, so we can decide whether we want to slow down or whether we want to overtake. So sharing the emotions of others might have evolved to perceive the safety of the environment. But this does not prevent the fact that maybe sharing the emotions of others can also, as I've shown in humans as well, help to develop some other regarding behavior. So for instance, this animal can be taught to press levers. And now, as a consequence of pressing a lever, he receives a reward, which is a food pellet. They like sugar pellets, like kids. And both of them give the same reward, but one lever is harder to press than the light lever, than the other one. So the animal will develop a preference for the lever that is easier to press, as probably many of us. Now I can play a trick. So now he goes for his preferred lever, and when he presses it, what I can do is to deliver a shock to the observer. Would it change its preference, or would the preference stay the same? Well, in our case, most of the animals would switch towards the non-preferred lever in order to reduce the amount of shocks, basically, that we deliver to the other. And you see it also here from this graph. So if they have the preference about 80%, now they will go down to 50%. You will see here that it's not a total reverse, right? They will more often switch, but not all the time. And also, not all the animals will switch, but many will. This parallels very much also our behavior. I mean, we don't always go to help, right? We do sometimes go to help. And then something that could be also interesting, we were wondering whether there were sex differences. And in our case, in rats, there is none. There are other situations, and in mice, you can also find a difference, but rats, there is no difference between the female and male. And if I now go and I perturb the region of the brain in this animal that is the same or considered like the homologue of the regions that in humans is active to the pain of others, so if I now go and inhibit that regions in the animal, what I see is that the animal will never switch again. Now the animal will stick to his own preferred lever, suggesting again the importance of these regions, in this case was the anterior cingulate cortex, in perceiving the emotional state of others and in deciding what to do as a consequence of what I've perceived. So here in conclusion, despite the emotion sharing could have evolved to perceive the safety of the environment, this also allows animals to become social and to act prosocially. So I think that is also important, the fact that sometimes even if something evolves with a certain goal, then the environment is so complex that you can also use the same machinery for many other purposes. So in short, emotion is already, the ability to share emotions of others is also present in rodents, in mice, in flies, in fruit flies, and in many more animals. And this exchange of information is bidirectional, and it also is the circuits that allows this emotional sharing is very much similar across species. And now we are at our final kind of couple of final questions, as do we control empathy? So we started to address our question by asking sort of psychopathic individuals to come to the lab. And we made them experience pain and witness pain. The idea was that because they are able to, so they act often in a non-prosocial way or in an insensitive way, that would have a reduction in these circuits. And when we mapped how they react to feeling in pain, there are no difference between them and a control group. But now when we compare them, when they witness somebody else being in pain, then psychopaths have reduced activity. So we thought, okay, this confirms many of the theories that are around. And indeed, psychopaths are insensitive, and if these circuits help us to share the emotions of others, they have a reductions that explains why they don't care. But that's not the whole story. We've heard a lot of stories that describe, but he was such a nice guy. I cannot believe he murdered his wife. We hear it all the time. So we asked our psychopath now to empathize with the person in the video. And when we do that, all the differences that we found before, basically all the regions that first were deactivated in the psychopath, now they become active again. So there are no differences anymore, basically, between the psychopath and us, suggesting that they don't lack really the ability to empathize, right? If they have a motivation or a reason to do so, they can. But maybe they would not spontaneously do so. So the ability to share is modulated by many variables. As mentioned before, these activities in the brain are more active, they're more highlighted when you empathize with in-group than out-group members. You also recruit these regions more if you are the responsible one of causing the pain to the others. And there is less activity when you're not the responsible one. And also, I've shown you basically, particularly from the case of the psychopathy, that you can regulate these activities. So if I ask you now to empathize with me or with what you see, you will all increase this activity. And even more importantly, if I ask you all to do the same now, you will synchronize your brain activity. Suggesting that all these habits that we have to do, group activities, right, they really enhance, they make us in sync, and they increase also the opportunity to listen and to share more. So I want to conclude here by explaining that in the field you often see this debate, you hear this debate of whether empathy is good or bad. And I can list you why it's good, I can list you why it's bad, but after all, it's not about being bad or good. A knife itself is neither good or bad. It's how you use it that makes it good or bad. And empathy is the same. It's a tool that all of us have. And context matters. It can be, dependent by the context you're in, or also who you are, or your motivations. You can, all these things can affect empathy, but you can still regulate it, making you in a certain way responsible of whether you choose or not to empathize. And with that, also apologies for taking probably a little bit more time, and thank you all for the attention. And one big thank that I cannot forget is to all the people that also help to realize this work, because science is not just the effort of one person, but it's the effort of many, many, many people, and we all work together to reach our results. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Valeria, for the very interesting talk. Now, again, we are receiving many questions, super interesting, and also, we are a bit late with the time, so we are going to pick just a couple of questions. There's one from the audience, from Viviana, and then we will have another one. The microphone is arriving here. Thank you.
The question is partly explained by your slide. You didn't speak about mirror neurons. Is there still a role in mirror neurons? And also, yes, this inability to imagine the suffering or the intention of other people, is it part of the autism problem? And is there, by understanding empathy and emotion, is there a possible therapy or solution?
So yes, mirror neurons, I think they do have something to do with it. And also in rodents now, we were able to identify neurons that discharge both when the animal is in pain and when the animal observes the other individual being in pain. So I do believe that within these overlaps that I showed mainly in humans, there are neurons that do both. I'm not sure that the whole system is only based on these neurons, also because there are not so many. So it becomes interesting to understand how important they are to determine the behavior. So we are really trying optogenetically to disrupt specifically those neurons to see whether they are sufficient, basically, to disrupt the behavior or not. And then regarding autism, I'm not sure that these circuits is necessarily impaired in autism. I think that there is some. The results are quite controversial. You find studies that indicate that they have problems in sharing the emotions in terms of brain activity involved, and others they don't. So I don't think that is the central and the core problem of autism. They have problems in social environment at times, but I don't think it comes from these circuits. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. Just one question from.
Sorry.
Just one question from our non-spoken channels. And I think you touched on this a bit. What role does bias play in empathy?
So
Is it easier to be empathetic with somebody you consider yourself to be similar with, or not?
Yeah, so I think that this system is very simple in a way, and because of its simplicity, it does also helps creating biases, right? Because if you move in a way, or if you feel in a way similar, or you express your emotions in a way that is similar to the way I express it, then of course I will probably highlight these circuits even more. So that would explain why we feel, closer to certain people than to others. And these, in terms of community, can also have some, importance, because of course it's a balance between the energy that you want to invest in something, and it's kind of known that you are more willing to invest energy for the closest to you, and then further they are, less willing you are. But because we can voluntarily regulate them, it's not an excuse not to overcome these biases, right? Yeah.
Thank you.